Hello and welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are breaking down all the action from match week 1 of the CPL. The CPL is officially back. We had 4 matches over the weekend, and we have so many thoughts and points to talk about across all 4 matches, so stay tuned. We'll try to keep this to a relatively short-ish episode to make sure we don't go too long, but there is so much to talk about. Before we jump into it, though, make sure to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC and also on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. So you can see all the lovely visuals that we have and our lovely faces. And make sure to follow on Canadian Soccer Daily, where we're going to be uploading some clips from this week's episode, and you can get some of the best bits on there too. But let's start with Game 1, the match week opener, the season opener, which was Ottawa against York United. So this one ended 2-1 in favor of Ottawa. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of us might have done a 2-1. I know I put York to have a 2-1 victory at the last minute. I clearly got
I was watching, listening back. I think you went 3-2 York. I think you were very excited.
Even more.
I think I went 2-1 Ottawa. I think I got off to a decent start. I think I went 3-2 to Ottawa. I don't know. Just figure that out.
Okay.
Those who listen,
exactly. For those who listen, they can let us know if we got our corrections right or wrong, though I'm pretty sure I got mine wrong. But it ended 2-1 in favor of Ottawa, with goals starting first. York United opened the scoring with Austin Ritchie in the 48th minute, and then Atletico Ottawa did the comeback through goals of Manny Aparicio in the 64th and Chris Twardek in the 79th. Fun fact, Mike, I don't know if you saw this, but this was the first time in Atletico Ottawa's history under Carlos Gonzalez where they actually had a comeback victory. They've never had a comeback victory in the 2+ years under Cargo. So a little bit of history there in the opening match, but we're going to go into some of the big talking points of this match. Let's start with York United, because I think we can both say that York United were the better team in that first half. Surprisingly, we talked a little bit beforehand about with Ottawa, maybe it would take some time to gel, maybe when they wouldn't hit the ground running. Certainly felt that way, but for York United, again, maybe because they have a lot of the same players, they kind of went on almost if they had a couple more games of practice over Atletico Ottawa, and they created some really good chances in the first 45. Austin Ritchie, he had he was a name that popped up a lot in this game for some good reasons and for, I guess, a lot of maybe not great reasons. Let's start with one of the biggest not great reasons, which was this open net miss, this howler. It was 22 minutes on the clock and 22 minutes in, and we already have probably one of the misses of the season already in the very first game of the season. But I mean, York did really well get up to this point. Some really good play down the right-hand side. It felt like York were really exploiting the fact that Ottawa were pushing up their wingbacks with Debrien and Twardek, and York, they had that sort of threat in behind on the counter, and were able to expose those areas that were left behind, and that sort of allowed them to get opportunities like this one. But for you, Mike, did you see anything of York that might have surprised you in the opening 45 minutes in the way that they played?
Yeah, I mean, they were really positive from the start. I was really impressed with Brian Wright's movement at the top. He really made it difficult for those central defenders, because he wasn't afraid to get across the pitch, put a lot of work in finding those spaces where those fullbacks, like you say, were quite attacking. So there was channels or opening for him to run into. He was doing really well at bringing the ball down and linking up play. And I thought he had a fantastic game to get, especially in that first half. And Tabla and Debrienne got a lot of plaudits for their sort of link-up play, but I thought Max Ferrari was fantastic as well, who laid off that chance that we see Austin Ricci that would be replaying in some nightmares for him over the rest of the weekend. But I thought he was brilliant. Like, I mean, he's up against Tabla, Debrienne getting forwards. But I thought Max Ferrari was great throughout that half as well. I was with him. I wasn't 100% sure what to expect, because I mean, he's their highest cap player, but he gets filled in lots of different roles. And I was curious as to like which is Martin Nash going to give him a set starting role this year, or is he going to be moved and dotted around and filling in gaps? But he seems like he's the one that's going to be from week one anyway. He's their right back, and I thought he did a great job at saying, like, just give me a role, like just let me have a role and I can perform. So that really impressed me as well. And for you, do you think, like, one thing I was impressed with Higgins coming in at the last second, signing. So the chaos hasn't completely departed York United. So changes had to be made. Evetnik coming in as well. Like, changes are happening on the day, let alone in the build up for this, and they just look like they all knew each other's role.
Yeah. I like what you said there about Higgins, because I mean, it wasn't just Higgins as well. It was Higgins and Noah Batne both coming in sort of last second because of injuries that they had, like Oswaldo Leon literally Frank Stirring, I think it was, literally in the warm up got injured, and Oswaldo Leon has a slight knock, so the two starting center backs weren't there, and huge test for these two, for Higgins, who just signed. Obviously he probably trained for a little bit longer, and Noah Batne, who was one of the young stars for York last season. And to be fair, inside the first 60 or so minutes, it did really well to keep Ottawa quiet. Obviously down the left side, Tabla and Debrienne were threatening behind, but the entire back line of York United was very impressed in the way that they kind of didn't panic. They were really well organized. Obviously it helped that Ottawa weren't really playing all that well, but still, I mean, you can crumble under the pressure, just the sheer weight of the names and the talent in front of you. And they did really well, and they had really good mature performances to be able to have the performance that they did in the end, and that sort of gives Nash maybe not a headache, but at least some confidence that if they ever need somebody, one of the two young center backs to kind of step up to the plate, if Leon or Stirring is ever not there, both of them can do a good job. But yeah, overall, I think York's organization, the first 45, and the fact that they kind of baited, almost it felt at times like they baited Ottawa to attack and to kind of overcommit, and then if they won the ball back, they quickly like went the other way and countered. And it was a first half where you really thought this should be 2 or 3-0 up for York United, and the fact that it wasn't concerned me, because York United is not a team historically that you say, oh, they can handle, like they won't concede at all, and they can go and they can create a bunch of chances and it won't come back to bite them. It is a game, unfortunately for them, where that happened again. And what was let's talk about the Ricci goal. I mean, finally he got his goal. It was a good capitalization, I think, on Ingham sort of not really being able to punch too far in the second half, and he managed to take it down really easily and volley it low and hard to the corner and beat Ingham. And it was funny, that was a much harder chance that he scored than the one that he missed.
Took it really well. But how you can score that and miss the other one is it's hard to believe.
Exactly. And then you would think that the equilibrium was finally met, but no, then Richie had to go and have another little bit of a howler, not missing an open net, but missing an absolute glorious opportunity here. As you can see on the screen there, he had a clear pass to Brian Wright. And this is 1-0 up. They were still winning. This could have been for 2-0, could have completely changed the whole outlook of the game. And on his right, he goes and tries to put it passing him, and it hits it right to him. And the opportunity is gone. You could see Brian Wright, his head in his hands. He couldn't believe that Richie didn't square it for him. And I think Brian Wright deserved that, because he really impressed me in terms of his movement, in terms of his hold up play. Like you mentioned earlier, he was somebody that I didn't know if he could step up to the plate as that striker. I mean, I haven't seen enough in terms of goal scoring, but in terms of build-up play, in terms of every other thing, facet of what is to be a good center forward, he kind of demonstrated it in that game. But did you feel after this sort of missed opportunity here that maybe the tides were changing into Ottawa, and that they were kind of riding their luck, and then Ottawa is going to, wake up and do what eventually they did in the end?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, after Ricci's miss, Abatne not being able to get anything on that
chance.
corner, the back post, just getting all caught up on losing the flight of the ball, I guess. And yeah, Ricci, I mean, his goal was well taken, but his decision making throughout this game was awful. Like, it just seems like the way where you missed that open goal, to not get your head up when you've got this opportunity to just square it in and give that 2-goal lead. York, just at that point, you're thinking, well, in theory, I mean, York should have 4 goals at this point, and to only have 1, Atletico Ottawa are gonna start improving. Like, you can't count on them not having any rhythm for the entire 90 minutes. They've got a good team. Chances will come. And yeah, they made it really hard on themselves, unfortunately, York. And then, yeah, like you say, things changed as Ottawa got that little bit more comfortable, and York were, I guess, as the game went on, they were not quite committing quite as much, because they're having to be a little bit more cautious and manage the game. And yeah, unfortunately for York's point of view, chances just weren't taken.
Yeah, and it was exactly around, I think it was around the 60th or 65th minute, where you saw Ottawa really click, and they started, moving the ball around well, especially through the middle. That was something that I think that was lacking. They were doing well to go wide, but when the minute that they went middle, York did really well to break up their play, to kind of, break their passing lines, and so they kind of were forced to go backwards and to recycle. And it was, to be fair to Ottawa, it was a new look Ottawa, obviously, with the players, but also with the strategies. Like, it was completely different from the super defensive team that we saw last season. This was attack, wing backs overloading, Tabla and Bassett kind of cutting in and wreaking havoc in the half spaces. You had Sam Salter supposed to be more of the hold-up player. We didn't see him do that all too much in this match, so maybe a little bit concerns there. But it was so much, different than what we were expecting from Ottawa, and maybe that was something that, because it was a new style of play, it took a little while for it to click, and then when it finally did click, that's when York started to be put on the back foot. And after that, you can kind of sense that there was some tension, there were some nerves around York United. And the biggest thing for me is, okay, if you feel like your back is starting to get pushed against the wall, and you're starting to feel like this game is starting to get away with us, you just gotta be, when you're clearing any chance, when you're clearing a ball, put your foot through it, like really clear it. Don't allow any opportunities to happen. But it just felt like York kind of fell asleep on both of the goals, because for Manny Aparicio's, it was the same thing, where it's like the ball went in and it was a good ball, but then Sissoko had the chance, it shot, and it was saved, and there was no one around. York were just statues, and then Aparicio kind of came and headed it, and I think it was almost a goal line slave, but because it was such a well-placed header, but still it wasn't enough from York United. They couldn't clear it after what it seemed like a relatively harmless ball in. They kind of made it worse than it was, and Manny Aparicio managed to capitalize on it. And it was the same thing with the second goal from Chris Twardek. It was Ottawa had dealt with the danger. Like, the ball was I believe it was cleared or something, but it didn't clear properly. And then Ottawa, I forget which player had it, but a York player had it, and he didn't clear it fast enough, and Aparicio dispossessed him, like literally in his own box, then did a stellar Trivela cross for Chris Twardek. And Chris Twardek, really good technique and decision making to not put his foot through it, but rather side foot it into the corner. Because how many times have we seen somebody try to go for that volley and they sky it into, row Z?
Yeah.
No, he was very, very clever in the way that he did it. But it just felt like, I don't know if you agree with me here, of York just kind of putting their foot off the gas and kind of lapses in judgment, and that's what cost them in the end with the 2 goals that they conceded.
Yeah, early in the game, the way they were pressing and the way they were closing down players was just much more committed, much more energetic, and much more I'm going to block, then I'm going to win. Whereas the cross came in, like you say, a corner came in for the first one, is cleared slightly to the edge of the box, and Mo Babuli sort of strolls out and just turns his back, so Tabla just moves past him. There was no like effort to get the ball. It was just I hope he shoots and it hits me. Oh no, he's gone past. And then everyone just retreats back to the goal line and you get a block in, but no one's attacking the ball anymore. It's just getting behind. And similar again once that ball comes in, they're all for the Twardek goal. They're rushing back. He's gone the other way from where they've gone, so it's fallen behind them. Really well taken, like you say. But yeah, they're just recovering then rather than defending like in an organized manner. And Ottawa did give them troubles throughout that half, so maybe like they weren't able to keep that shape because of what Ottawa were doing later on in the game. But yeah, unfortunately for them, it just didn't really stick. And I guess the biggest talking point coming from that after Ottawa take the lead is, I mean, has Chris Twardek got any skin left on his knees? Or...
Yeah, no, I think you can actually see a thin layer of skin all across that turf there, because it takes a brave man to niche line.
I think he lost control.
6 feet, like he slid, like if it was a rainy, wet grass pitch, but he slid across. And I'm pretty sure, maybe even in this photo, I think if you zoom into the photo that we have here, you can see blood and like some lesions that he had there that were of his skin just left behind. But that's how much emotion, it takes. It overcame. Yeah, it meant a lot for him, obviously. Another local boy, and be able to score in front of Ottawa. You could see the celebration that he had and the passion that he had. And it was, in the end, it was an admirable performance from Ottawa. But sort of looking back at it as a whole now, were you convinced by Ottawa in this match? Because so much, maybe it was because of the expectation going into it and everything, that it made us feel like this team was going to be amazing from minute one. Obviously, we mentioned that it might not be that way, but were you convinced by the end that this is a side that can really challenge at the very top, at least just on this 90 minutes, or is it maybe too early to tell?
I mean, probably too early to tell, but I'm not the only one who just felt Ollie Bassett was in the wrong position. He was, by giving players like Aparicio and Tabla the opportunity to play their role, you're sacrificing what Ollie Bassett's been doing really well, from being in that central area to then maybe moving around the pitch and finding spaces. He's having to do it from the right wing and come in, and it takes away some of the great work that he can do in picking out areas to be dangerous. Luke Singh's how should I put this? Incredibly casual manner on the ball concern me, the way they're going to build out, because that's going to be vital for them, because they want to get their fullbacks are wingers, so they're going to be high. They're going to be sacrificing a lot of that space in behind them with the aim of keeping possession. And Luke Singh needs to sharpen up a little bit. I'll give him a break as it's game one. I won't be rinsing him too much, but bits like that, like you say, it is week one. But there's just a few little bits where it looks like they still need to work on where these players are going and how they're going to they're going to approach games like with the ball.
Yeah. And again, I think that'll take time, and that'll
Mm.
take a couple more games. You could see some glimpses of them, having something really special. Like I mentioned, that left side with Tabla and Debrian, that could be a very, very dangerous combination once those two get going, because Tabla can dance past and he can create havoc, while Debrian is just rapid down that wing and he can just blow past anyone. So that combination could be very, very lethal in the coming weeks. But before we move on to the next match, I also wanted to talk about one of your favorite points with York United, which is their discipline. Because we got that on show again. There was two little tussles in the match, in a match that it has obviously history, but you wouldn't expect it necessarily as like
Mm.
to be have tension boils over so much. But we saw it in the first half, towards the end of the first half, with Ricci, talking about somebody who maybe
Yeah.
didn't have the best decisions, and Aparicio, both of them sort of going at it. I think Ricci flopped, was it, or somebody else flopped?
Yeah, he went down trying to get Aparicio slip booked or
Yeah.
something.
So there's a little bit of fracas there, and then at the very end as well, I think it was after Twardek challenge or something, a bunch of players came out and yellow started flying, and it felt like, oh, here we go again for
Yeah.
York United. And I was curious on your thoughts, if you felt, well, this is what happens when you have a York United side that still has a lot of these players.
Yeah, I think Ricci's going to be one of those guys. Like, he's going to be in the middle of everything, stirring things up. And I think some players just thrive on that. They want everything on the edge because they perform their best when they're sort of trying to wind up the opponent, but themselves getting wound up as well. But I did things did get more agitated. But the good thing we noticed, like in past seasons or last season, they would have started throwing in some bad tackles. They would have got frustrated and just lost their heads completely and like almost hurt other players. That didn't happen. When things were, it was all very verbal for a change. So I think it's a step in the right direction for them, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully we don't see too many yellow cards and red cards from York, and maybe we'll see some signs of growth from some of those players. But yeah, a good match, a good opening match overall. Quickly looking forward, I think for York, the biggest thing that they have to learn for their game against Forge is they have to take their chances, especially against some of these good teams. They just need to be able to take their chances, and they, especially being back at home, they, historically in last season that wasn't their best ground, but I think they need to actually make it a, maybe Fortress is asking too much, but at least a place where they can consistently get some points. And I think taking your chances is going to be the biggest thing, and not switching off when your back's against the wall. And then for Ottawa, I think it's just they need more time to gel, and they have to start the games a little stronger to show what they are really made of, especially what they showed in the second half. So hopefully we get to see a little bit more of the super team get more super as the weeks come on. Now let's move on to the second game, which was the rematch of the CPL final last year. Forge FC faced Cavalry FC at Tim Hortons Field, and it was another 2-1 victory, and it was another comeback from the home team. It was the script writers got it twice. They might have copy-pasted it into this one. Goals from Camargo in the 60th minutes is what started off a corner. Then Borges began the comeback for Forge in the 70th, and Batibanga made it 2-1 in the 76th, and another quick turnaround for the home team. The first half, I will be honest, as the graphic I'm about to show kind of reflects, was a little bit of a snore fest. Overall, it was, I guess to put it more positive, it was a chess match between Tommy Wilden Jr. and Forge FC. It felt like, Cavalry in their 3-4-3, it allowed them to get more players in the passing lanes of Forge to sort of neutralize them. Forge still had majority of possession, but I don't think they were as comfortable as they wanted. Meanwhile, Cavalry, I think, also struggled a little bit in their build-up, and they never really got to many areas where you would think, oh, they can create something here. I think, the best chances came from long shots. Orchowski had two, one which was a shot. The other one, I'm not convinced was a shot. It looked more like a cross that almost, snuck in.
Yeah.
And then Borges had a curler outside the box as well. Overall, I mean, the first half, like I mentioned, I don't think there's too much to talk about. But did you see anything particularly interesting from the first half that you might want to point out?
I did. I remember texting you saying I was quite keen on Sergio Camargo as like a dark horse
Mm-hmm.
MVP player, and I thought he got off to a great start. In a pretty sleepy first half, he created the possibility of two shooting opportunities, which were only really I forget one of them, but the second one was intercepted fantastically by Owolabi Belewu, who again really impressed me around that. We spoke about Kalongo having to come in and not have like a central defensive partnership in front of him that was established, and like whoever was going to play alongside Ashinoda Johnson is going to have to step up quickly, and Owolabi Belewu did that. I thought he was really, really good. Really looked sort of composed, really looked confident in his positioning, when to attack the ball. So those two, I mean, yeah, there was some bright spots from others, but in the first half, those two really impressed me. I thought Camargo just looked like he was going to get something for this team and get something, provide that spark, but Owolabi Belewu was just there to stop it, and each time. So.
Yeah, no, great shouts. I mean, Camargo, you're right, had those two. I think it both came from like driving inside the box on the
Yeah.
left-hand side where he could have created. But like you mentioned, Malik Olowabi Belewu just kind of shut him down.
Yeah.
And, Malik had I think he won 10 out of 11 duels. So almost every time they went up against someone, he won, which showed like how great of a performance he had overall. And I think a lot of people were impressed by his ability. And the fact that, again, I mentioned in previous episodes on Forwards, the young players need to step up this season to kind of fill those gaps of the players that left. And if that's the way that Olowabi Belewu is going to play, then I think that is exactly what is going to be asked of him.
Really
To
impressive.
step up, because that's a talent that he has, and he showed that in this game. But yeah, aside from that, like you mentioned, a couple bright spots, but not much happened until in the second half. In the 60th minute, when Sergio Camargo got the opener off a corner, I don't think it was intentional from Camargo. I think he was trying to flick it to the back post, and instead he flicked it into the back netting, into the side netting there. But great goal for him. It was his 100th appearance. He's a day one Cavalry player, and I don't know necessarily if that was, exactly as it was drawn up again, but still a really good goal. And did you feel like at the beginning of the second half it was deserved from Cavalry, given how they started, or did you think it was against the run of play?
It's tough to call. I still felt like Forge were growing into the game, but I still felt Cavalry had something to offer. And I agree with you. I don't think it was designed for Camargo to get the goal off that set piece, but it did remind me of the season before, Eric Cobbs's goal off that free kick, the really well worked passing pattern. So I did feel like Camargo's a man that they're probably not going to tightly mark in the box. He makes that move to flick onto the back, and then players were probably meant to then attack it, but it goes straight in. So it takes out the middleman almost. It did look like a play that Cavalry were planning. It just went slightly better than they were expecting, maybe. But they did. I just felt they've got that. They had that in them. I think what I was trying to work out, which may make it feel like it was against a run of play, was what they were asking of Wojciechowski and Musi. Because Wojciechowski had a really good game. Musi was in and out a bit. We could see what Camargo was doing. We could see where he was attacking. He was trying to find those lanes to make late runs in. Wojciechowski was doing, and I think they said on One Soccer, it was almost like a like a budget Harry Kane, like going all over the pitch and picking things up. But if
Mm.
you're doing that, you need more players to move, like to make those runs in behind. And Ali Musi wasn't making those runs, so play was getting a bit like the build-up play. They have players to do little sort of intricate passing. Yeah, we can keep the ball, but then when we turn out and we go forward, we haven't got the option because Wojciechowski's come in and no one's tried to replace his threat in behind. So I think that just made it seem like they weren't getting what they weren't in the game quite as much. I just think they weren't organized enough in that manner of how to be more vertically dangerous.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because I also noticed that a little bit, that Wojciechowski, like, he would, because when you're a center forward against two center backs, you have to move around. If you stay still, you're going to be completely out of the game. You're
Yeah.
going to be invisible. So he was doing well in that he was moving around. He was trying to pick up the ball. He was trying to do build up play, but it felt like it was a little bit disconnected from what everyone else was doing. It was just like, yeah, no one was taking up the spaces that he was creating. No one was dashing in behind, doing a diagonal run in behind to kind of occupy the spaces that he's creating by dragging out center backs. And it felt like it was just, yeah, I don't know if they're fully, maybe on the same wavelength yet, the wide players and Wachowski. And obviously that's something that they're gonna have to work on, because Wachowski, I think, is gonna be the main man now, the main number 9, now that they don't have Meyer Bevan there.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I don't know what you think, but their wing backs are both quite defensive wing backs. You haven't got pace, desperate to get forward. It's not like Bradley Camden has great defensive attributes, but he's a completely different player to the likes of Matteo De Bruyne. Like, who wants to get forward, run down, get the crosses in. Bradley Camden's a little bit more conservative once he gets in, like, into the opposing half. And the same on the other side with Shamit Sharma. He's not trying to beat players for pace down wings. So if players are coming out, those wing backs aren't getting forward. If you haven't got as many runners in the middle, it just makes it a bit of a slower build up for them.
Yeah. No, and I think, Fraser Aird, I think, might have been the player that could have given a little bit different on the right, because, like you mentioned, Shamit Shom is a player that isn't super attacking. He's somebody that more will be like invert. He'll go into the midfield rather than go really down that wing and just spam crosses, which is I think something that Cavalry could have taken advantage of, because of the way that forwards were kind of pushing their fullbacks into high areas, trying to really, get the wide areas with a lot of numerical overloads and the like. You can take advantage of that if you have wing backs that, as soon as you win back the ball, they're bombing in and taking that space in behind. I think, like you mentioned, Cavalry don't really have that. I think Fraser Aird might have been a little bit better than Shamit Show in that regard, but I don't know how much better, honestly. But one thing that I think was a turning point that you wrote down in our notes here was the substitutions, because the substitutions, I mean, they all happened after Tristan Borges's goal. And for Tristan Borges, it was a goal that he sort of crafted by himself. He got the ball into the box and he had to sort of turn his man, then take a touch and kind of just place his shot underneath Carducci, and really well worked. And again, it's kind of, you forget, if you, especially in if you haven't seen the CPL final and you think about the season, the last few seasons, that Borges is a really, really good player.
Yeah.
Like, he's a very, very talented player. 2019 Borges obviously was, a phenom for all intents and purposes. And we've seen glimpses of that, since in other seasons and stuff. But it's moments like this where you kind of are like, wow, people kind of sleep on how good Borges is, unless he scores wonder goals like he did in the CPL final, or he scores really tidy goals like this one. But that's what you need. That's the kind of player that you need for any championship team. Is just a player that if he gets the ball, he can create magic, and all he needs is a yard of space, and he can do wonders with it. That's Cavalry had that in themselves with Ali Musi. It was just, in this case, it was Tristan Borges that ended up doing it. But after Borges' goal, we saw the Cavalry substitutions, and you felt like it kind of messed with their shape for the rest of the match.
Yeah, it's slightly, especially because, I mean, after these changes, they continued to target Fraser Aird. Like, they were targeting their left wing, getting Badibanga in. because they moved out Shamit Sham, Leighton Brooks came in for Ali Musi, and they're just that whole right hand side changed, and Forge just seemed to look at it and go, right, they're not prepared. Like, let's target them early, let's get them quick, and let's see if they're ready. And they weren't. Like, there was a little bit of a disconnect, and they were getting the ball out to Benny Badivanga, who was getting into one-on-one situations quite comfortably with Fraser Ed immediately, and Forge had runners that weren't being tracked, so he had support while on and it was creating these overload on the right, which led to the goal. And I just, unfortunately for Cavalry, like, their response to the game going 1-1 just wasn't sharp enough, unfortunately. And I think it was because, I mean, you could look at it and say, those changes all down that right hand side, and Forge just target you immediately, and they've got players who are up to the speed of the game, whereas the subs weren't.
Yeah, no, and I think you can really see that, like, in the second goal, in Benny's goal, because it came down that left side. Benny, had Fraser, and I think it was maybe Diego Gutierrez. He had two men on him, managed to thread the ball through to Borges in behind in the box. And then it was so weird. Everybody from Cavalry immediately became attracted to Borges. I don't know, it's because he just scored earlier, but everyone started to crowd around Borges in that split second, at least in moving in that direction. And the only one that wasn't was Benny Badibanga, who went the opposite way. And that's why, when Borges managed to turn it around and give that 1-2 back to Benny. Benny had acres of space, and yes, he got a little lucky with a deflection, in the middle, but he still had a lot of space, and he still had the time to be able to take that shot on. And we know that even if there wasn't somebody there with a deflection, he probably would have still scored that, just with his caliber and with his quality.
Yeah.
But it really exposed, like I mentioned, with Cavalry, that right side, that you hope that when you make substitutions, it strengthens your team, but you always worry that it'll take a couple of minutes for these players to come in and sort of settle. And I think Forge are a team that when they smell blood in the water, they will attack viciously and efficiently, and that's exactly what happened. And afterwards, as much as Cavalry tried, they couldn't get back into it. Forge just managed to hold on to the win all throughout. And it's funny because Benny Badibanga was a player that, until those substitutions came in, until the 70th minute, it was rather quiet in the game. It didn't do too much, but that's the joy, I guess, the good thing of having a luxury player like Benny Badibanga, where all you need is for him to switch on 10-15 minutes and he can get you, 1 or 2 or 3 goals, and that can completely change the game on its head. So really good from Forge overall, and to be able to do it against Cavalry side that were there gunning for revenge, and that they're still favorites for the regular season championship. It was a little bit of a statement win from Forge overall. Before we move on to the next one, Mike, looking forward, do you think that this is something that maybe Tommy Wilden Jr. and Cavalry have to be worried about with this first match? Was there anything that you saw, any patterns of play or something that would maybe warrant a little bit of alarm bells in this defeat? Or do you think it was just one that they have to move forward from and not think too much of?
I mean, looking back at it, like, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I would have stuck how they were playing last year with that sort of 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. They didn't attack with pace enough, and Willie Akio didn't really get into the game when he got a little bit of time at the end. They need to get players like him in, because they were too slow. We'll see what Leighton Brooks is like. Had some flashes while he was on of getting forward. But I think Tommy Wilden Jr. will be concerned about how slow they were in the build-up a little bit too often. And they'd be a bit too defensive. And like we said at the beginning on Friday, the preview show, like, you look at the team and you think, which team's going to score the most goals? And we said this, like, they don't do it enough. They didn't do it enough last year. They managed games well enough to get through. And this is the toughest one, probably. Like, going to Forge for Cavalry always seems to be the toughest one. So we'll see how they get on the next one. But I think, it was a bit of a wake up call of, we need to be quicker, we need to be cleaner, we need to step up.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Forge, they start the very first time that they have
Yeah.
a season opener with a win, which is incredible
I guess this
considering the
means they
success.
won't win the playoffs now.
No, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking this is actually a bad sign for them
Yeah.
because they always come alive at the end. If they come alive now and they kind of waste all their good performances now, what's going to happen in the playoffs? What's going to happen? You never know. I mean, I think most fans would be happy with that, though. I think most
Yeah.
fans outside of Forge fans would be happy with Forge not winning the playoffs this year. But we'll wait and see. It's still very, very early in the season. Though one thing about that made me really laugh about this game is that Borges and Benny Vanga scoring 2 goals to come back from behind reminds me of something. It
Yeah.
reminds me of a game from last year that almost resulted in the exact same thing. And like the meme says here, it was the same game. They're the same picture. No, but really good game, especially the second half overall.
But what
You
was
were always going to get a chess match from
yeah,
these two,
and exactly, and also that like there were only 3 shots on target the entire game.
and all of them
And
went in.
neither keeper made a save the entire.
Efficiency, efficiency. But yeah, it was a great game, and now we're going to move on to the third game of the match day, the last one on Saturday, which was Pacific against Halifax Wanderers, and this one broke the trend of the 2-1. Though it still was the 1-goal advantage win. That was because the game ended 1-0 in favor to the home side. Another home win, 3 in a row. And spoilers, it was a 4 in a row for the later Vancouver game. All the home sides were loving it. They were winning in front of their own fans, which was great to see. Saluf scored the only goal in the 35th minute from the penalty spot. It was a game low on goals, but a lot of talking points. So let's start with sort of what happened in the first half, which was Pacific and Halifax playing similar yet a little bit different games. I say that because Pacific were holding on to possession pretty well. They were going from one side to the other. They were lacking a little bit of directness in the first half. It really wasn't until Endom said, "Screw it! I'm gonna pull a Magikarp James. I'm gonna venture forward and break the line myself." Where they actually had that opportunity, and he threaded that ball in behind for Rian Moore, and Rian Moore got tackled by Julian Dunn in a very, very silly challenge. Like, I know Julian Dunn isn't the most experienced player. He's still quite young, but that's a very, very silly challenge from Julian Dunn to give the penalty. But aside from that, Pacific didn't really offer all that much in the attack. Well, Halifax, they didn't have as much possession, but when they did, it felt like they were a little bit more threatening, especially in the wide areas. But they kind of lacked that bite in the final third to really get, some substantial chances. Would you say that was your assessment of the first half as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same old for Pacific. Like when they do have the ball, there's movement around. They pass quite well. They switch play. Saluf started out wide and was coming inside a lot more as the game went on, just to try and find space and to see if he could do anything there. But it's all nice enough build up until you get to the final third for Pacific. I mean, just the 4 shots, all on target, to their credit, but throughout the whole game, it's just really struggling to find a way to really test Jan Fillion.
Yeah, and actually, I was talking about it with Alex Konge-Ruzek at the Vancouver game because he covered that for the CPL website. That out of all of their shots, they had a combined xG of 0.88, including the penalty, which has a xG of 0.75. So it was so little that they created, so little threat that Jan Fillion barely had to do anything bar the penalty.
Yeah,
but that was the difference in the end. And I think looking at Halifax, they were able to cause issues for Pacific, but Pacific were so well structured in their defense. That's one of the reasons why I made this meme here of James Merriman, blocking out all of the threat from Halifax because of the way that he set out his team defensively. With Endom and Thomas Meyer-Guier, they really held it down, and obviously the midfield helped as well. They were so well structured that as soon as Halifax looked like they were going to threaten, they were kind of, just push back, and they had to resort to sort of lofty shots and shots outside the box. And it's incredible because they had 13 shots in this game, but only 3 of them on target with
Mm.
no goals. And they had, I believe, a higher XG. I don't remember the exact number right. I think they had a higher XG than Pacific, but even still, like with that many shots, to only have 3 on target kind of shows that in the actual Pacific, in like in the Pacific's box, they weren't able to create all too much. I mean, Nimick had a chance early in the first half off the head with a header, and there's Zachary Fernandez had a really good chance towards the latter half of the second half after halftime. But do you feel like Halifax were just they played really well, but they were just missing that little bit of spark, the creativity, that incision that they needed to break down a really resilient Pacific defense?
Yeah, Valesky struggled to really find any opportunities to do all too much. Really, the Pacific defense, like you say, did really really well. They obviously targeted and Dom at left back sheerly for the fact that Saloof isn't going to help him. So they were getting numbers down there. Dan Nimick was getting forward from that sort of right centre back spot. Fernandez wide. Probo or like Adrian Daniels when he came on, like they're attacking that area, knowing that Ndom's being sort of left on an island by his winger. But once that ball came in, they would like Gazdov was fantastic. Amadume did really well. I was really impressed with him because my expectations weren't particularly high. I still felt like from the games I saw last year, he just seems like a young player still with a lot to learn, but qualities. But I wasn't sure if he was ready to be thrown into a game like this. But he did really well. Obviously, TMG and Mukabila continued their form from last year as well.
Yeah, no, the defensive structure was the thing that was most impressive for me from Pacific. It was a really well organized back line. And you know what? To be fair, the same could be said with Halifax, because Halifax were taking a page out of the Vancouver Whitecaps in the way that they were playing. It was something that, again, I talked about with Alex because Alex was covering it. Patrice Geyser spent some time in the offseason in Vancouver, where I actually by chance met him at a training, and he mentioned that he was kind of shadowing Vanny, and it seems like he got a lot of inspiration, like a lot of ideas, because he Halifax played a proper back three, not a back three that turns into a back five like most back threes are. No, this one was actually a pure back three in the way that Vanni Sartini likes to call it, where he says only ourselves and Lazio play this way. Well, maybe Halifax. You can add Halifax to the list now, because Timoteo and Zachary Fernandez did not fall really all that much back into defense unless there was significant overloads. They kept up, and it allowed them to really put pressure and press the wide areas, and allow that Pacific weren't able to recycle all that easily because they were there and kind of block those passing lanes. It was bold from Patrice, but it obviously the penalty was unfortunate. But aside from that, I think Halifax played a really good game. Arguably, you could say Halifax probably deserved to win that game if there was any team to win it. So I was really impressed by the way that they played in this sort of proper three at the back 3-4-3 formation that they had. But unfortunately, like I mentioned, it's missing a little bit of that bite. But Pacific, credit to them, the way that they held their own, and the fact that these young players like Amadou May and Thomas Mayer-Guerre that we know is good, but more focuses on him because of Didic leaving. Now he's sort of the guy, right? Obviously, Ndum is there as well, and I'm guessing he's sort of stepping into that leadership role. But for a familiar face, he's sort of the guy in the back line, especially now that they're playing it with the three at the back there. So I really enjoyed seeing the way that Pacific kind of maybe showcased a little bit of defensive stability that we weren't expecting after Didic left. So I was very much impressed with the way that Pacific were able to hold their own in that match. Before we move on, Mike, for you, do you think that Pacific are a team that maybe should be taken a little bit more seriously after this game. Even ourselves, we were doubting if they were going to be competitive. They went up against a Halifax side that a lot of expectation is on, and a lot of optimism is around in year 2 of Patrice Geyser, and they kind of said it should have probably maybe been a stalemate, but they managed to nick a win, and that's something that I think deserves some credit. Do you think that maybe that we should be paying more attention to Pacific now?
I think so. I mean, this is taking into account Grenade Luke being suspended for this one. Obviously, like getting him back in is going to be big for their attack. The width he provides down that right. So they've got players to come in. I was impressed with Lamotte. I wasn't expecting to see him, Pierre Lamotte playing, but Cedric Toussaint came on later in the game. You got Adonijah Reed and Hurd ready to compete for these places on the pitch as well. So and Rion Moore looks. He didn't get too much service, but he looked like that target forward that they're wanting, that mix of Gennaro Daniels and Easton Ongaro, and trying to get the best bits out of them. So if they can keep developing, working well, and building that sort of relationship on the pitch, then they've got a good team there. And Emil Gazdov looked like he's going to take a really good step forward this year as well.
Yeah, no, very, very strong performance from Emil Gazdov overall, and it's very much a good step in the right direction here. But for Halifax, we talked about they have to start well because they have to get points away from home, and it's something that I know that even Patrice Geyser was talking about, that they want to turn these good performances into points, especially when they're on the road. Do you feel like this was a little bit of a missed opportunity from them, and how do you think it'll affect them as they continue in the early parts of the season?
Yeah, they'll be really disappointed, especially as they really picked up. I mean, they had the ball a lot in that second half, and they showed some good bits, but I felt Telfer and Probo just weren't as dangerous as Ferrin and Daniels. And when they came off the bench, like you saw Daniels' quality on the ball as he was getting past players quickly and trying to start attacks. And I'll be interested. I'm not 100% sure why both of them were left out of this one and were on the bench, why he made these changes. Obviously, we know what Telfer can bring and Probo, but I just felt that they didn't a whole new front line. They just didn't seem to be. Pacific had them well organised. Like Pacific weren't as threatened, but once Daniels came on, I thought he could have changed the game, and they've got to start him in the next one.
Yeah, well, luckily for them, they're sticking in British Columbia as they move only across the ferry to go to Vancouver FC on Thursday. And speaking of Vancouver FC, let's move on to the fourth and final game of the weekend, which was Vancouver FC against Valour FC, the VFC v VFC / Sean Hundle Derby, the team I cover to the team that Mike unfortunately has has a soft spot for. This one was the most action-packed out of all of the games, and clearly it deserved its only game of the day tag because it brought all the goals and all the action. We got 5 goals, a red card, lots to talk about. But as I mentioned, Vancouver FC took this one 4-1. Sorry, Mike, for their first win of the season. Valour actually opened the scoring in the 24th through Jordan Swivel, and it looked like Valour were on pace to get maybe something from this game, but unfortunately in the 46th minute, so 45 plus 1 in added time in the first half, Moses Dyer got his first goal for Vancouver FC. Then quickly in the second half, Vancouver FC turned it around in the 47th minute through Paris G with an absolute banger of a shot. Though I know we'll talk about the goalkeeping on that one. Then Bitar made it 3-1 6 minutes later, and to basically sort of kill off the game. It was definitely killed off as a few minutes later we saw a second yellow given to Jordan Faria for diving. We'll talk about whether that was or was not a dive in a little bit as well, before David Norman Jr. came in and joined in on the fun in the 67th minute, scoring off a corner routine. So, Mike, a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel bad for you because of Valor, so I'll let you have the floor. We'll talk about Valor first before we talk about Vancouver. What were your thoughts on the opening half? I know you were so chipper about them beforehand, and I'm sure you're just as chipper now.
Yeah. Oh, it was a hard watch. I'm glad I didn't stay up for it. It kicked off at midnight on a Sunday night here, work in the morning. So I thought I'll get some rest. So checked the score in the morning and looked at it. And I didn't check the times of what happened. So I see the red card and I think, oh, okay, like red cards probably changed the game. But obviously, like Vancouver were 3-1 up before that happened. And watching the game, it was Valour are just so ponderous. There's players, every time someone had the ball for Valour, everyone just turns and looks at them. And they were just waiting. They wouldn't make a run in advance. They would only run once the ball had been kicked. So they're already behind the defender who's anticipated it. Or they're standing just asking for it to feet. And that just gave Vancouver time after time the chance to just go, right, well, we're in position. Yeah, keep going, and we're going to wait for our pressing trigger, and then we'll get the ball and we'll attack. And it was easy for them. That Valour made it really, really easy for Vancouver over and over again, until like a really, really good cross from Antonoglu. Like it was the only times I can remember that the ball was just thrown in, like, and it wasn't that players were making runs and he spotted it. He just saw, right, I'm in a great position. I'm going to put this in the danger area and I'm going to hope someone gambles. And luckily at that point, Swibel did. Swibel, I'm not sure what we're going with at the moment.
Swibel, no Swibel.
So, yeah, they got lucky. When you look back at that game, and especially that first half, you look at that and you just think Vancouver were the better team. They were the more adventurous with the ball. Still, they weren't in their flow. But as that half went on, you just thought, well, this is two teams that aren't playing great, but I can only see one of them looking to improve, and it was the other one that got the opening goal. It was a good header from Swibel, but I worry about, if you want Sean Hundle to be your striker, the players around him need to be the ones making movements, connecting the game. Like they need to be good with their feet. I didn't see that from Swibel at all. Like he got up and he seems like he'd be a poacher. Like he one touch finishes and don't give him any more than that. So I'm not sure how he's going to fit it, how this is going to fit going forward. But yeah, it was just really disappointing. It's the sort of thing you look at, sort of low level, just telling players you've got to make the run first, not wait till he kicks it and then go. It's just really disappointing. And I think, the supporters groups online with Valour, there's definitely obviously already the calls for the coach's head. like fans are frustrated, and like he needs to wake this team up. Otherwise, it's going to be a short season for Phil Santos.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, these fans, they play good. They pay good money, whether to go to the stadium or to pay for the service to watch their team, and it wasn't a performance to be very proud of. And there wasn't, like you mentioned, they didn't play all that well. They were a bit pedestrian. I think Valour in that first half. One bright spot though was, like you mentioned, Temi Antonoglu, because Vancouver, I think by design, were quite compact and they were allowing Valour to go into the wide areas, but then they weren't really pressing that intensely. Like it felt like Vancouver lacked a bit of intensity as soon as they went wide to try to actually close down and stop them, because Temi Antonoglu had all the time in the world. He literally took a nice little stroll as he touched the ball and then whipped that cross. And he had so much time on the ball, and everybody was just kind of like jockeying around him, not actually doing anything from the Vancouver side. So I think that Temi overall had a pretty good game, especially in that first half. He was one of the brightest spots that I noticed at the stadium. But yeah, aside from that, not too much to write home about Valour in the first half. Vancouver, like you said, grew into the game, and at the very end of the first half, we got Moses Dyer getting his first goal of the season. Really well worked goal. I mean, Alejandro Diaz, we mentioned before that's going to be the two-strike pairing. I see Diaz being more the creator. I see Diaz being more the one that opens up space for Dyer to kind of occupy and go into to be able to score the goals. And that's exactly what happened. I think it was Gabby Batar that put the ball in for Weddle Diaz. Weddle Diaz with a clever little back heel that Moses Dyer managed to gather. He kind of dropped the shoulder, got past his marker, and then slotted it into the corner, into the back of the net. Really well worked goal. Really good for Moses Dyer. He looks ready to score goals for this Vancouver FC side. I think that maybe now they found the right balance between two strikers that they didn't really have last season, which obviously created all of the issues with Sean Hundell and Weddle Diaz. Maybe wasn't able to create all those, to score all those goals, but maybe he can create all those goals. He got 2 assists and a place in the team of the week because of the way that he was playing creatively. And as soon as halftime went and it went 1-1, I mean, for me, I kind of felt that that was a really crucial goal because the game was sort of going
that
only.
Killed him.
Huh?
Like, if that killed Valour, to concede right at the end there, because as that goal went in, you saw Vancouver settle, and they're like, okay, now it's gonna come, and you saw Valour we just had to get to half time, and then who knows what the game would have been after that. But yeah, Vancouver it flicked a switch, that goal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the old saying always goes, "Don't concede right before halftime," because it doesn't give the coach has to switch up his halftime talk. The players are dejected. The players are just conceded, while the other players are now the players that scored are excited, and the coach can kind of use that and harness that to make them go out for the second half. And it felt like that's exactly what happened, because literally 2 minutes afterwards, I had just gone back into the press box. Thank God, because I was out getting my traditional popcorn as I get for every halftime at Vancouver FC. I just got back from getting my popcorn, and I literally put my stuff down. I look up, Parachute cuts inside, and I think, what's he doing there? And then he just laces a shot, and everybody goes crazy. And I'm thinking, what a start to this second half, because it was an excellent strike. And, it means so much, obviously, emotionally for him, for his homecoming. Obviously, there's a story with his dad and everything, and he had a lot of friends and family there. So for him to be able to score on his debut, that kind of goal, and he kind of ran to the bench and everybody was patting his head. It was like a full team huddle. It was such a heartwarming moment that really, I think, exemplified where Vancouver FC are now, where it is sort of this almost fairy tale homecoming story where we're a family because we're all locals and we understand what it is. It's not this kind of huge gap between the players and the community. The players were the community. We're part of the community before. So that helped, those kind of feel good factors really played into Vancouver FC on the pitch. These kind of small, mental things really boosted them, and fantastic goal. But I know that you have a couple of words for Viscosi in this one, as you felt he might have not done enough for Parash's goal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really well taken goal, and I owe Paris G a personal apology, because last week, talking about how Cordova is York United is a different profile of player. Paris G is an excellent defender, but doesn't get forward very much. A goal and assist, and that kind of finish.
You're hard out.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really impressive, because I still thought that, I mean, you mentioned Antonoglu. I thought Alacon had a decent game as well. But Paris was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And Viscosi, in the first half, I thought he looked decent. And I think, considering what's in front of him, I still felt he had quite a good game, made some decent saves, but I think he'll be disappointed to concede at your near post. If that goes in and it's curling away in the far post, as we see, so many players cutting in off the side and wrapping it round and outside into the far post, it can be so hard to reach. But when it's at the near post, I think he'll be Viscosi's probably going to be a little bit annoyed himself with that one. But I don't want to take too much credit away from Paris G, because it was a really, really well worked goal.
Yeah, it was a very well worked goal, but for Valor, unfortunately, it kind of felt like that just was the deflating goal. It was
Yeah.
just like everyone's heads drop, and you
Just
kind of
blow
see,
it
oh,
now. Just blow the whistle.
yeah, exactly. Just call it now. And you could, and afterwards, like Vancouver FC were really popping the ball around. And Vasco Fry was a player I was very, very impressed about because he was
Yeah.
dictating that midfield. After the game, Ashton was talking about comparing his side to prime Real Madrid of Galacticos, which bold shout, but he was
Yeah.
saying it's like, those players had like Zidane and Figo and Ronaldo. And it's like, but Vasco was like a Makelele. He was the sort of the water carrier. He was a player that was like a vacuum. He just picks everything up and distributes it, and he doesn't maybe get the plaudits that he wants to or he deserves. And to a degree, I mean, especially the last part, I agree with him because Vasco was like he
Really.
had the space to be able to put his head up and see the runs in behind, into the channels and just thread those balls through. And Gabby Batar had before his goal an excellent opportunity, because of those overhead through balls in behind, in between the center back and the wing back, and it just plagued Valor. And after the first time that happened, then Gabby Batar, incredibly missed, even though it felt like it was a relatively easy chance for me. You would think that the defenders would be like, okay, we got to watch that,
Yeah.
but then they did it again on the other side, and this time it was again Paris that ran in behind and squared it for Batar, and Batar was this time able to put it on target and put it past Viscosi, and it was a goal where very well worked goal, but it was too easy. It was
Yeah.
too easy from Vancouver, and again, it's like Valor didn't learn their lesson after they just got let off a few minutes earlier.
Yeah, I mean, Valor going to 3 at the back, they were just leaving massive gaps between the back 3, and then Verhoeven and Campbell in front of them far too often. And what Vancouver did that Valor couldn't is have 2 different ways of attacking, and you hit the nail on the head there with Vasco Fry, because Vancouver gave him the chance to either start a build up with and build up through the thirds, or play it long. Like when you've got those 2 options, it makes it difficult for the defense. Whereas Valor on the other side were constantly asking for the ball to feet, and Vancouver got settled. Like Vasco Fry was fantastic in that game, just because he had that opportunity. Right, I can see the runs from Diaz. I can see Bitar getting forward, or I've got Renan Garcia here, and someone's dropping, and we'll work our way through. Like so, they had different ways of getting forward, and when you've got options, it makes it harder for defenses. And I mean, that's basic, but they were able to do that, and they controlled the game, and a lot was through him. It was a really a really impressive game.
Yeah, very, very impressive game from Vasco. And come the end, David Norman Jr. obviously popped up with his goal, another kind of homecoming goal from the local boy as well, another heartwarming moment there off of corner. Poor defending from Valor. I mean, it was a simple routine: go to the back post, head it back across, and then just put it in. Valor's were like statues. They were statues. Yeah. It looked like that box was Madame Tussauds with the Valor players there. But yeah, 4-1 in the end, a dominant victory. What I really enjoyed from that match, being there watching it, was not just the performance in and itself, but the way that the players did, like the way that the players went about it together. There was a sense of unity. There was a sense of togetherness that I didn't really see all that much last season from Vancouver FC, but maybe because they brought back so many local boys, maybe because they brought different profiles of players, different kind of leaders, more players with experience. It feels like a really tight knit group. At least compared to what I was able to glean from last season. And I think that's going to help the team a lot because, they're going to have a lot of tough matches. Not every match is going to be as easy or as glamorous as this one was in the 4-1 win. It's going to be tough matches where they're losing, where they maybe don't deserve to lose, or matches that they're drawing that maybe they are deserving to lose. And they're going to have to rely on these players coming together as a team to pull them through it, and rely on these leaders and these individual profiles to kind of, help them get across the line. So that was the thing that I really enjoyed the most watching this Vancouver side, and the fact that Vancouver have so much strength and depth that I was sitting just like in front of the press box. There's a little section on the side where some of the staff are, and there was sat James Cameron, under 21 Player of the Year candidate, Anthony White, who is a starting center back last season for them, Elliot Simmons, who has a knock. He probably wasn't going to be in contention anyways. But these are just like, and obviously Grady McDonald wasn't there, and the U Sports drafts, that's what they're called. The U Sports draft players weren't there either. So I think it was like 6 players weren't even dressed, and most of them would probably be in the 18 last season, if not starting, if not stars.
Yeah.
Goes to show that, when I was talking about Vancouver FC have raised their ceiling and their floor, that's to the degree that they have it now. And Afshin afterwards mentioned, it's like, I'm not a coach for rotation. I'm a coach of performance, similar to Patrice, where it's like you gotta earn it to be not only in the starting 11, but in the 18 itself. You gotta earn it, which I think is going to breed a lot of good, healthy, hopefully healthy competition from the players, and really push them to break heights and to break their own ceiling and to push past some of their limitations and become even better players. Obviously, we'll see. We've seen that Afshin Goppi is somebody that can have some issues with certain players. They don't always see eye to eye. So we'll see if there's any drama that unfolds throughout the season. But for now, it looks like they got a really good winning formula there. While for Valour, Mike, you put here Valour has a lot to do, but it can only get better, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of
It has to, surely.
At the end. Do you think that there's something to look forward to Valour in Matchweek 2 for them to improve on, or are you kind of already dreading what the season might hold for the team?
Yeah, I really worry about them. It has to get better, because Phil DeSantis has got to look at that and just think that's not going to last particularly long if we continue playing like this. Like this is last chance saloon kind of season for him, and if this club is looking to try and compete and progress year on year, and stay in the league year on year, the things need to get better fast. And the way this team played was just hard to watch. And that must, I mean, if he doesn't send the rocket up and get things working and get them playing to a higher tempo, you can't see where they're going to get points.
Yeah, especially again on the road. And even Phil, like at the end of the conference, was like, "Let's talk at the end of the away instead, like the long way to set, see how much it affected us."
You can't be already on the first game. You can't be saying, "I'm not playing at home till this time. Give me that."
Yeah, I don't think he's a coach that really wants to. Yeah, doesn't want to use an excuse, but I mean, it is a huge factor for them overall, and it's going to be tough. This is probably one of the games where you feel like you want to set a standard down and you want to be able to say we can get points away from home. But I mean, they're doing the opposite of Halifax now. They're going to Victoria while Halifax are coming to Langley. And with the performance that Pacific put in, it's going to be tough for them again to try to pick up some points. So we'll see what happens with Valour. Hopefully it gives Mike here a little bit of joy at some points in the season. But
obviously no Jordan Faria, the next one after his stupidity.
How can we forget? Yeah, the second yellow card. So you agree that it was a dive?
Yeah, 100%. And the initial yellow card was pointless, just pulling back Caden Chung losing the ball, just pulling him back in the corner, near the corner flag. It's not like he's being in any sort of dangerous position to start a counter attack. It was just pointless to take that yellow card, then to dive when you're already on a yellow card. How his players are all patting him on the back and saying, "Don't worry," as he's walking off the pitch. I would have been furious if I was his teammates. It's like, we're already losing. We need to get back in this game. You're on the yellow card. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the first glance from the press box, it looked like it could have been a penalty call.
The referee
Watching
really
back the
get
replay,
there.
yeah, no, the referee did really well because watching back the replay, you can kind of see, oh, he started falling down, or he's kind of was looking for it. But the fact that it's one thing if you don't give the if you don't give the penalty. It's like
Mm.
you say, no, there's not enough in there, and then you just let it go. You point for a goal kick. But the fact that they're cracking down on dives this
Mm.
year, and they're like, no, you are not allowed to do that. Here's a yellow card, and I'm pretty sure a Vancouver player also got a yellow
Yeah,
card.
I was going to say Mickey Cantav got the heart, like he had to get given. I don't think his was as blatant. I feel like he was. I felt like looking at that one, if Faria hadn't, like, if that hadn't happened early in the game, it would have just been, no, you just lost balance. Off you go, carry
But
on.
he tried to keep it consistent, yeah, which I
Yeah,
don't mind. That's the
yeah,
biggest thing of a referee. You got to if you give a yellow card for a dive over there, you got to give a yellow card for a dive over
yeah.
there. You have to be consistent.
Mm.
But I like that they're being more consistent with that because it means that players will think twice over diving. Maybe we'll see somebody like Josh Hurd get a lot more suspensions.
Yeah, I mean,
If
and
the-
again, like people battered the refs last year, and there were a
yeah,
lot of bad decisions. But it was a really good opening weekend from refereeing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd say so. Maybe a
Compared,
couple
like,
moments.
on the standard we're expecting.
Fair,
Like,
fair,
and,
fair,
and,
fair. It's a low bar. It's a low bar
yeah,
overall.
we haven't on 4 games, and at no point are we looking at them saying like this was terrible.
Very true. Very true. We haven't mentioned the words VAR yet, so
Yeah,
it means it goes to show it was a pretty good match week for
yeah.
referees overall. But now let's move on to our player of the week shouts. So, Mike, I'll start with you. Who was your player of the week for match week 1?
So I went with Emil Gazdov. Particularly because of the mistakes that were involved in his game at the beginning of the season. He got dropped. He worked his way back into the team. He looked like he was trying to put them behind him. And this game, he was really organised, really, really well marshalling his box. He didn't have that many chances on target against him, but he was judging the flight of the ball so well. He was coming out and commanding his area. It was just a really, really sort of mature performance. I was really happy for him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. It was something that, like, last season you saw Gazdov have a little bit of issue at the beginning with some mistakes, and it cost him his spot for a little while. But a really strong start to 2024 with Pacific, and hopefully it's something that he can build on as the season goes on. Especially if he has a good defense in front of him, if he's solid as well, then that'll be a winning formula for Pacific. I went with the man that is pictured right in front of you there, Paris G. Not just despite what what you said about him and Cordova last week. I genuinely was super impressed by him. Obviously,
Really,
I'm a bit of a romantic, so I really like the heartwarming side of his
yeah,
story and the goal and the assist. But he just performed really, really well. He was fantastic down the left side, defensively in the attack, and because he's a right-footed left back, the fact that he can cut in and cross or shoot, and like in the case that he did there, it was fantastic showing overall. And I think that if they can get a player like Paris G to be that consistently, then
yeah,
they're going to have threats not only in the attack, not only in the midfield, but in the defense. And that's only going to bode well for a team that's, really looking to push to make it into the playoffs, or maybe even higher to potentially pushing for the title. We'll see. It's way too early to tell now, but we'll see. The last thing we're going to do as a new feature for us this season is we're going to have power rankings at the end of every match week. So we're going to look at what the table was beforehand, and then we're going to make our power rankings based on that. So for those who can see the graphic, that's based off of having them all in alphabetical order at the beginning, 1 through 8, because that's how they technically were before
yeah.
the first match week. But for those who are listening to us on as a proper podcast, I'll go through our power rankings. First is Forge FC, up 2 from 3rd. Obviously, they might have not had the flashiest of win over Cavalry compared to Vancouver, but we can all agree Cavalry is a better side than Vancouver. Than Valour. Maybe Vancouver, but I don't want to, put words in my mouth with that yet. So that's why we picked Forge to be in first. Then in second, obviously, Vancouver FC up 5. Then we went third, Pacific FC up 2 because of the reasons that we mentioned, that defense, and we were really, really impressed by the way that James Merriman organized his team. Halifax alphabetically was fourth, and they stay fourth for us despite losing. Just because of the way that they performed. It was a game where they arguably should have won, but they just lacked a little bit of in the attack to really punish Pacific FC. Then in fifth, we have Atletico Ottawa down 4 despite winning. Just because we weren't all too much convinced by the performance doesn't mean that they're obviously a bad side. They're a very, very good side on paper, but it might just take a little bit for them to get going. In sixth, we got Cavalry. Again, it was a game where it felt like there were some frailties that we weren't necessarily expecting, both in the attack and the defense. So they have quite a bit to work on before their next match. Yeah. Seventh, York United up 1, because again, they probably should have won that game against Ottawa. They definitely had the chances to, and they'll be very, very hard pressed to not have come away with a point, let alone 3 points that they probably deserved.
Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, at the very bottom, Valour FC down 2. It's just, I don't think
we can just put, I think we could probably put them in 10.
I think we might
emphasize the gap there.
Yeah, we might have to staple them there at 8. I thought Thomas's comment on seeing 7 teams that are capable of fighting for the playoffs was harsh. Maybe there was a little bit of insight in that. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can see Valour can get a resurgence. Yeah. They'll come in. They'll come around. I'm sure. Knock on wood. But that is it. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first recap episode of the CPL season. It was a fantastic match week. We're so excited that the CPL is back, and we can't wait to be able to bring you more episodes, more content, different kinds of content across the season. So make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials so you can see some of the other things that we're putting up, some of the graphics. We're starting to make reels now, planning to make a match day vlog on the game that I went to on the weekend between Vancouver and Valour. So keep an eye out for that. And if you have any interesting facts, stats, or questions, let us know and you might get a shout out on the next show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.